Welcome, everybody. We really appreciate you all coming to Norcal Real Estate MasterMind Meetup. Whether you heard about it on Facebook or Meetup or Eventbrite or whatever, it's really good to see a lot of familiar faces and maybe some new ones. So, welcome, everybody. I'm Noah Laker.
I'm Sean Go.
And together we are Hardin Realty and Property Management. We do brokerage. I'm a broker. Sean's a sort of a tech wizard, zen, wise sage. And we do brokerage and loans and property management. We have about 100 Airbnb properties that we operate for ourselves and for our clients. That's what we do. We're going to pass the mics around, everyone, just do a really quick little introduction about who you are, what you're looking for, what you have to offer, what you had for breakfast, whatever. And then John Vignocchi was kind enough to spare his time. He's very, very knowledgeable, very experienced developer, syndicator, awesome guy. So you'll introduce yourself.
Let's start over there.
Yeah.
Mr. Steve.
Special emphasis on workforce housing. So it's kind of like privately financed affordable housing. What gets me out of bed every day is the thought of building new apartment buildings and providing people with housing at prices that are less than what my competitors offer. So that kind of gets me going every day. I started in the business we started our first triplex. We bought a historical triplex in Boulevard Park, so in Midtown. And that was a fun learning experience. Didn't make that much money, but it was still fun. Didn't lose any money. Just kind of got the bug. That was in 2016. So about 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that. I don't know. But then started realizing, like, after doing smaller projects, so 2 to 4 unit projects, being my own GC, finding like alley infill opportunities, it was really difficult to kind of get the scale that you need in order to kind of survive with a wife and a young child. So I decided to go do larger projects. I had a background in investment banking and working for a large renewable energy developer before I kind of took this job. So I had a little bit of like those chops. I knew what it was like to raise, hundreds of millions of dollars of equity and debt, and decided like, okay, well, if these other bigger guys like Satiri or Mark Friedman or Mike Heller can build these big projects, I can too. So we started with our first 30 unit building. It's at 16th and E. It's called Studio 30. We just delivered it in November 1st, 2024. And it's 30 units. So the studios there started around $1,400. The 1-bedroom units start at $1,650. And if you can believe it, that's actually an affordable price for a brand new place in Midtown. If you've been in Midtown for a long time, you're probably like, wow, that does not sound too affordable. But relatively speaking, our competitors and comps are priced out at least a couple $100 more than that per unit. And we use some creative financing structures. We don't do LIHTC or any sort of tax credit deals. We do welfare tax abatement. So we get a property tax abatement on the back end. So any units that we rent to low income individuals or people who make up to $70,000 a year, we don't pay any property taxes on. It's a really efficient way of financing affordable housing. And we're looking at scaling that. In Sacramento, we have 41 unit project under construction called the Grace. That's at 15th and G. If any of you went to South, the restaurant South, Gina Guyton, if you're familiar with her, she's reopening South in our restaurants called she's renaming it LaRue Garou. So it'll be at the bottom floor of that. We're really excited because that part of the neighborhood and part of Midtown really hasn't had much in the ways of good eateries in a while. And so we're hoping Gina can bring a crowd, and she knows how to do that. We have a 132 unit project that we're breaking ground on next week. That's at the corner of 12th and E by Doug. Found out Doug and I are neighbors. Some of our properties are next to one another. And that was like a vacant lot that was just had overgrown. Actually, our mutual friend Daniel found it. Had a bunch of lead in the soil. Nobody really wanted to touch it. We found a new creative way of activating that lot and hopefully providing really solid return for our investors while also providing a great product to the community and the renter community. We have a 340 unit project in Davis as well. 20% of those units will be affordable. So this is kind of a newer product to bring to that market. Davis historically has been really difficult to get anything entitled or approved or built there. So we're really excited about that one. Mostly will be like We think students, obviously, because it's a big student community, but probably also focus on work. There'll be like a healthy amount of workforce, maybe Davis faculty or graduate students. So yeah, and it's the first time welfare tax abatement has kind of been used in this way in that market. And it's kind of the crown jewel of Sacramento because of the supply constraints and the high rents. So yeah, so we're looking at a couple deals in Walnut Creek and others. So we're trying to find like other areas where this model makes sense, where the construction costs are low enough, the incomes are high enough, where you can deliver, affordable workforce housing for people making between 60 to 120% of the area median income. And historically, what's been happening in the last 15 years is a lot of capital has flowed to big multifamily projects that are, quote unquote luxury. So a lot of the mid-rise buildings that you see here with the nice pools and pet wash stations, and that's great. We need that type of housing. We need all types of housing. And then a lot of government financing goes to kind of very low income. We're talking people who are 30, 40, 50% AMI. But unfortunately, kind of your everyday Sacramentan, people making between 60 and 120% of the area median income, which is effectively like 45 to $100,000 a year, are typically really find it hard to afford a place to rent. And so we're really serving that need. It's kind of the biggest part of the bell curve. It's crazy. We really stumbled into this opportunity through a collection of people that work with, and it was just the right time, right place. We did all this in partnership with the Capital Area Development Authority. So if you're familiar with them, they're a joint powers agency that actually oversees a lot of our street. A lot of the reason why our street was revitalized is because of CADA. So we have a fantastic regulatory partner that's required in order to secure this property tax abatement. And so I'm just gonna like blabber on for a while, but if there are any questions, it really helped focus my thinking. If somebody had a question or two that they wanted to ask me, because I could just sit up here and talk about random stuff all day, but there we go.
Since you're commercial and residential properties, do you know about SB 721 balcony
Yeah.
inspection?
Yeah, I know about the balcony inspections.
I assume you do.
Yeah.
A lot of people die.
Yeah.
It's shocking how many people surround where.
So that's a great thing. I really focus on new construction. So I started my career in Sacramento in 2019, working for a GC. And I quickly learned that it's easier, after doing my own remodels, it's easier to build from scratch than it is to remodel. So I admire like the fix and flippers and stuff. I think that's definitely needed part of the market, but I'm not, that's not my thing. That's not what gets me going. I like tearing buildings down, building from scratch, or I like vacant lots. And luckily Sacramento has luckily and also unluckily, not so lucky, Sacramento has a lot of vacant lots and underutilized land. And in real estate, it's good to find your niche and kind of find your focus. Because in any type of real estate deal, there's like 10,000 things that can sink you, and there's 10,000 variables that you're dealing with. A lot of them are outside of your control. And so risk management and kind of being familiar and comfortable with something is really critical. But then you also don't want to get stuck in the rut. And I think that's what happened with a lot of developers through the periods of ZIRP where interest rates were zero. Everybody was building basically anything they could and marketing it as luxury and really high-end housing. And what happened is in 2022, there was a big shift, right? The interest rate, easy money, decade of easy money ended, and interest rates whipsawed. And a lot of developers, I would call them my competitors, although there's not really, we're all kind of friends in Sacramento. It's not a terribly competitive market. They didn't see this opportunity, and we did, right? Because we didn't have a lot of stuff in the ground. We weren't, we didn't have a lot of muscle memory, and we didn't have a lot of capital tied up in projects that had a historical legacy kind of debt of focus on some other type of product that worked when interest rates were 2% and now interest rates are 5%, and that doesn't pencil anymore. So that it's like you want to focus, but then you also don't want to get just caught in the same thing and doing the same thing and missing kind of the next wave. And I think the next wave is really housing for everyday working class folks and giving them opportunity to live in Class A luxury buildings, but not pay, exorbitant prices for it. So
John, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people here with some development experience, like flippers.
Yeah.
So they may be flipping single family, duplex, triplex, whatever, right? If they want to level up, play the bigger game like you, like, can you give some key things like how to level up?
yeah, think big, start small, succeed often. So that's a good motto. So you have to have a little bit of an ego to do this. So, think big, right? It takes somebody with you have to be crazy. You have to have a little bit of an ego. But start small. So start small on a triplex, or actually, hold on, take that back. Start on a duplex. Never build a triplex because you go into commercial code. You're better off building two units with ADUs or something, or two duplex units with ADUs. Like, avoid anything that gets you in commercial code unless you're at the right scale and your costs can absorb it. In Sacramento, that's very challenging. So that was actually one of the first mistakes. One of our first ground up construction projects we did at 13th and Democracy Alley was a 3-unit building, and I'll never build another 3-unit building again because the code treats 3-unit buildings like they do 300-unit buildings. Doesn't make any sense. But yeah, start small. Like, start with a duplex, start with a fourplex, or if you buy a fourplex or a triplex, right, you can renovate those. That doesn't trigger all the new codes, so you're okay there. But if you're building from the ground up, yeah, you start on something that's digestible. You probably won't make a ton of money on it unless you do the GC work yourself and you can kind of vertically integrate and compress margins, or capture a lot of that margin. That's what we did, and you learn a lot. And that's the thing. I learned a ton about Type 5 construction. And Type 5 construction is, there's 5 different construction types. Type 5 is what most housing products are built. And a lot of developers historically did Type 3 wood frame construction. So it's like 5 stories of wood frame construction over the podium, like a 1 or 2 story podium deck. But I learned everything there was to know about Type 5 construction. How do you, fire rate a penetration when you have a wire running through a wall, like a party wall with your neighbor, and all those types of things. Like, learn your craft, learn the details, learn the difference between what a truss is and what a joist is, what the pricing and the components, right? Because when the supply chain gets all out of whack and you have to figure out, like, how do I make my project pencil? I always use joists, but cost of engineered wood is 4x the cost of saw and lumber. Probably makes a good idea. It makes sense to go to a truss. Like, you have to be intellectually curious. You have to be really passionate, and from there you'll build a good foundation, kind of uh, gathering other people. If you can use other people's money and learn how to use other people's money, that's great. But if you have your own capital to keep investing, that's generally kind of that's a winning strategy as well. But if you're going to raise money from other people, you have to do it on a small scale, because nobody will trust you or give you a $10 million check to do 100 unit project. You need time and more gray hair, which I have in my beard, but not so much in my head, to get that type of capital.
Can you clarify when you say stick to duplex and not like triplex? Because my understanding is that 4 units and below is residential.
Yeah.
And when you say don't go beyond duplex, it goes into the commercial. My understanding is that 5 and above then is considered commercial.
Yeah. So in the financing world, you're right, because Fannie and Freddie and agency loans don't. They don't, I think, go over, or it's very challenging to get like an owner occupier loan. If I don't think you can for a 5-unit property, but you can for a 4-unit property. And so there's a lot more conventional loan products if you are under that 5-unit cap, so 1 to 4 units. But on a code side, on a building code side, that's more of what I'm talking about. Because you can get financing for 5-unit projects or 4-unit projects. That's a wrinkle, but it's not it's on the margins. A kind of a binary issue is if you build a 3-unit building, you have to spend generally about like $150,000 just on your fire suppression equipment, having a backflow preventer, having an alarm, having a full NFPA 13 system. Versus if you're doing a 2-unit building, you can save on $130,000 or $150,000 of cost. And knowing those codes, right? And that's, again, the challenge of development is you need to know what it costs, right, when you get started. Because if things change, or if you don't know what you don't know, or you have your known unknowns and your unknown unknowns and all that stuff, if you don't have that stuff dialed in early on, you're going to lose money, and you're going to lose a lot of money really quickly. It's a lot better to do that on a smaller project. It's a lot better to do that with your own money than with other people's money. So, but.
We're almost wrapping up. The music's going to start at 7. But I'm just curious, real quick, your framework for site selection.
Yeah.
You see 5 different parcels available in Sacramento. Which one do you pick, and
Yeah.
why?
Great question. So one of the benefits of Sacramento and the grid in particular is there's a lot of uniformity in how the lots are laid out in Midtown. It's, you've got your 80 by 80 lots, your 80 by 160s, your 160 by 160s. So when I look at a lot, I really quickly know how many units can go on there, how much I should pay for the land, how I value the land. So you're quickly running through all those quantifiers and those the kind of qualification in your mind on the numbers in the penciling. But then it really comes down to location. That's a huge factor, and so a lot of our projects, I would say, are in locations that are up and coming. Kind of like alkali flats, mansion flats, and now we're looking more at like opportunities in our street and in kind of places around here where they're already established, where there's this is a really fun, great place to be. It's not necessarily up and coming. So I think that's also the other thing is like, where's the location? Because the thing in Sacramento is that there's so much opportunity, right? You got to be able to focus on where you can deliver kind of the highest returns. And you could have a 160 by 160 site at 12th and E, or you could have a 160 by 160 site on our street. Generally the pricing actually isn't too much different right now because land prices are so depressed. What comes down to is, okay, if you're going to spend time, it's probably better to spend your time on our street right now. At least it is for me. But its location is probably the next most important criteria. When it comes down to, again, knowing what something costs and then backing into what you can what you can get your return on and then where, because that's what will drive your renter demand. Obviously, location is key in real estate, as we all know.
So my question is, knowing that for before you jumped into real estate, your background was in tech and also in finance, and just like show of hands, who is doing real estate full time? Like that's your full main hustle. So for many of us, it's kind of our side hustle. And knowing that both you and I, we started off real estate side hustle and we creeped in, like what is, three advice or maybe just like your top advice thinking through your past, like coming from the Bay Area, doing tech and achieving all that you've achieved, knowing that your company, Urban Capital, just recognized by the Business Journal for a whole new model for home key affordable housing.
Yeah.
And it can be game changing, not only for Sacramento, but for all of California. But think about when you started as you were transitioning from I'm doing part-time real estate and now going into full-time real estate. What advice could you give to folks who are in the spot?
Yeah, I mean, there's only 24 hours in the day, and generally you need at least 5 to 8 hours of sleep. So it's finding ways to be productive in those times. So if you currently have a full-time job doing something else, but real estate's your passion, it's how do you strategically maneuver your career to kind of meet what you want to do? And that's what I did coming out of tech. It was like, all right, do I really want to fly to Calgary every other week to go sell machine learning software to oil and gas companies? Not really. I'd rather be in Sacramento. So, but I need to make money and have an income. So I went to go work for a GC. But I was working for a GC while also working for the tech company. So it's like, I was like working like two and starting Urban Capital at the time. So if you want to make the shift, I mean, you have to sacrifice. That's a key thing. You have to be, again, kind of crazy. You have to be willing to bet on yourself. And then, you need to take tangible steps to actually realize that, but within the guardrails and of like how, because you don't want to end up, bankrupt or with no money before you even get started. So that's the key thing, is like trying to figure out how do you align to make a living to what you actually end up wanting to do. And that requires sacrifice, discipline, and all those other things that I'm actually naturally really terrible about. But because I was so passionate about this, I found a way to make it work. Yeah. So that's my advice, I guess.
Hell yeah.
My career advice.
Hell yeah. It's almost 7, so we're gonna wrap up. But John, you've graced us with your presence, and we appreciate it. So thank you.
For those who are new, usually we have to rush a bit sometimes to finish the speaking part by 7 because the music starts at 7. And if we continue speaking, then there's a conflict, and they might not be so happy. But we are all here to basically network, learn from each other, right? And what I encourage you guys to do is to not just gain knowledge, but work on your mindset. A lot of people, if you have a limiting mindset, you won't even try to start because you think that it's a waste of your time. You are not going to do much. But there are people here, okay? Shout out to Mike over there, Michael. there are people who within a couple of years attain like $10, $14, or do this, do that. So you want to network, you want to learn, but you also want to see what's possible, get motivation from each other, and then within a short time, it is possible to achieve great results if you put your mind to it. You cannot have a limiting belief. Okay, you don't get what you want. You get what you believe you deserve.
It's true. When Sean and I met, I had just got my first big boy job working in a leasing office, actually. Before that, I was driving a security truck. And before that, I was working at a gas station. Before that, I was in high school. And yeah, to transit, I wanted something more. And so I was sneaking in the bathroom, responding to emails, and I was working early in the morning and I was working late into the night when Sean and I started our little Airbnb business. And once one foot in front of the other takes you to the next step, to the next step. And being around all these cool people is also a great way to start. So with that, we're just going to hang out for the rest of the night. And as always, we really appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you.
Thank you guys.